we spent a lot of time focusing on that, and we gave up on some short-term looking wizardry technologically to believe in a data model that over long term would allow us to build some technical wizardry that now when we bring it to market, we do get that referral. People are like, that's pretty magical.
Welcome back to another installment of the Next Gen Case Study Series. On today's episode, we have Justin Beals, who is the CEO and founder of StrikeGraph, a cutting-edge security compliance company launched in 2020. With expertise in AI, cybersecurity, and governance, Justin has built StrikeGraph into a platform that streamlines compliance processes, helping businesses gain their compliance certifications quickly and efficiently. A serial entrepreneur, Justin has also held leadership roles at Next Step and Koru, which won the 2018 Most Impactful Startup Award. And he is an advocate for simplifying complex cybersecurity standards, positioning compliance as an opportunity rather than a burden, which is why we're excited to have him on the show. Justin, welcome to the program.
It's my pleasure to join today. Thanks for having me on, Devin.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm excited to get into some of the work that you're doing here with StrikeGraph, but before we get too far into it, Justin, I'd love to start with just a quick couple of minutes on who you are, where you came from, and how you landed in your current role as the founder and CEO of StrikeGraph.
Yeah, I've always been really interested in computers. As a kid, of course, I had a lot to do with gaming and also how they worked. I've been interested in how things worked. So I was probably a software programmer or hobbyist. You would have called me a computer hobbyist in grade school. I have a liberal arts degree, so I didn't study computer science in school, but I don't know if played with them or worked with them is the right term, but a little bit of both. And after I graduated college, I worked in the film industry for just a short while, but quickly found a job at British Telecom, being a software engineer for them and a network engineer. And really, I wanted to start companies. I actually started pretty early. So I graduated college in like 95. And by 99, 2000, I was thinking about building my own companies. I'm from Atlanta, Georgia originally. And back then there wasn't a lot of venture capital to go around. That was a very unique proposition in building a business, much more located in California than on the East Coast.
Mm-hmm.
And so all of my early ventures were bootstrapped. Had some successes, more failures. That's the normal story.
Yeah.
But was able to leverage my work in building businesses into leadership roles with other colleagues that were great founders themselves and entrepreneurs and work with them. Yeah.
So you've had hands-on experience in the bootstrap world, being this young, scrappy startup, and you've had the, I guess, fortune of being involved in some kind of more um, prosperous enterprises. And so, with
Venture
the
capital does not always mean prosperous, by the way.
fair, fair,
Yeah.
totally
Yeah.
fair, totally fair. Yeah, I'm
But
with
it's
you
it
there.
certainly is a faster on ramp. Yeah.
Yes, yes. So I'd love to maybe get a little bit more into some of your early experiences there and some of the differences in, the bootstrapping versus the venture capital investment, and
Mhm.
how that kind of helps shape some of your current efforts.
Yeah. Well, I think when you're bootstrapping a business, and we can see this no matter what the business is, a lot of times, you're looking for something that doesn't require capital to build a product, right? And so that's generally going to be something you can do with your own two hands,
Mm,
fundamentally. Whether that, whether that for me was software development, and I certainly was the first employee at most of my bootstrap companies. But then as we gained customers and the business grew, and we had opportunity, we would hire staff and expand the offering and the amount of revenue we were generating. It's it's hard, very hard, a lot harder than having someone give you a seed round of funding to go build a business. Um, it's incredibly gratifying. It is I think, immensely more stable business. And I don't think a lot of people know that. I don't think venture capital necessarily creates stability. As a matter of fact, it creates risk.
mm,
Um, A bootstrap business will need to be profitable from almost the beginning, and therefore they have a sustainability factor. Their cash runway, as a SaaS business would say, is infinite because they're profitable. Whereas a venture capital business has built the business, but they're not yet profitable. And so there is a ticking clock
Mm.
on their survival, um, and their success with that particular set of resources. Yeah.
Do you think the perception of that time crunch or the ticking clock, as you put it, is bears some level of influence on the performance of the team and how they execute on certain things?
I certainly think a deadline motivates, like
Hmm.
broadly. I've now both been managed and managed enough people that a deadline for me is helpful in focusing my efforts. Um, I so I think there is a certain amount of motivation there, but I think in truth, building a business, you should be prepared to work hard no matter what, right? I mean, if you're walking in unmotivated and not interested in building a company, whether you're bootstrapping it or venture capital, it's probably the wrong gig. You're not going to be very successful. So that's a given, no
Mm.
matter which startup you're working at. Um, I think failures can be more spectacular with venture capital raises, right? Because as a founder, you've invited people to put their money into your venture, and they
Mm.
could lose it, and that's going to impact people on either way, you're going to lose employees, but on a services business in a failure situation, hopefully, you didn't take out loans and are needing to repay them back. But yeah,
What something that I'm really present to here is, and I got two things that I want to spin off on here. So we'll start with
sure. Yeah.
um, venture capital backed uh, businesses versus the bootstrap businesses. One of them seems to be in a constant state of perpetual debt, and it's depending on who that debt is to, whether it's your line of credit or to a venture capitalist or somebody who's put some money behind it. At some point, that has to be dispersed, and everybody's got to get what they're supposed to get out of it.
Yeah.
But the outcome or expectation or set of priorities, which will be number two thing, is much different than it is with a bootstrapped company. And so I'd love to get from your experience what that looks like for the venture capital backed scenario. How do they maintain that perpetual debt and to what end? What is the kind of big goal in all of it?
Oh, I think this drives at the heart of the problem for Silicon Valley in a way. So let's take the bootstrap model first, because it is a little simpler. You're needing to be profitable right away, at least enough to reinvest in the business. Because let's face it, businesses are dynamic. So
Hmm.
they are either growing or shrinking. At any point in time, one of the two is happening.
Right.
And so, I think you're doing great as a bootstrap business. Let's say you're a couple years into it and you're getting 20% growth year over year. That's phenomenal, and if you're able to invest, some percentage of money back into the business to keep, maybe you hit a peak, it's a 30% growth or a 40% growth one year, and you kind of ride the lifts on the tide.
Mm.
You can go really far. And we did that. There were 5 years where the bootstrap business was, growing very small increments. But then there were 3 years where it was growing at a 50 to 75% rate year over year, where it just exploded. So there's a stability in that, right? Like you're around to take advantage of the upswings and make smart decisions when things aren't growing quite as quickly. Now, venture capital, a lot of people say it's not a debt because you've taken on, the venture capitalist money as investment and they take a stake in the business. So it is a direct transaction, right? Like you're selling them a certain number of shares in the business, but it comes with strings. And I
Right.
don't think people talk about that often enough. The strings are whatever the valuation was. And it is a perverse incentive in a lot of ways because the the venture capitalist names the valuation. They get to decide what they think it's worth. And the bigger the valuation, the more their potential investment will be worth later on. So they
Right.
tend to raise that price. And of course, as a founder, you want to sell the shares for as little money as possible to reduce the amount of dilution. You don't want to go from a, 15 to 20% stake in a Series A down to a 5% stake. And that means bumping up the valuation as much as possible.
Right.
But it's all paper money, or at least not real money, because it is an assumption that you'll meet that valuation outcome. And that valuation outcome, let's say that the market implodes and valuations are more at a 4x over revenue than a 10x over revenue, or the market is going crazy and it's a 40x over revenue, like we saw in I would say a 2021 year. It was exuberance,
Hmm.
is a nice way to put it, over the valuations. But you're stuck now. There are teams that we know that are competitors of ours that have raised maybe, in the 300 to $500 million and just capital raised at multiple billions dollars of valuation, and their revenue targets aren't even close to the valuation. So will people get their money out at the end of the day? It's tough to say. Yeah.
Right. And so that's the thing that I was kind of pointing at. I'm so glad that you made it there, which is to what end all of this seems to be for some sort of acquisition or exit of that business so that
Yes.
the initial stakeholders, so the people who put their money up, get that return on their investment. And then the business now can carry on or be absorbed as a business unit into some other bigger Goliath. And so that there's it's like a finite like ending to the whole thing. It's like, hey, we started here, this is where we're going to finish, and that's the end of that. Then we can start over and do something different. So how does that change when you're bootstrapping a business,
Mhm.
and what priorities are different for growth in those initial stages, and then kind of more long term, because the growth curve is not necessarily the same on either front either, right?
Yeah. Um, some really smart people have taught me that you don't necessarily sell a business, it gets bought. So
Mm,
this idea that you're going to be like, oh, I'm going to reach this magical number and I'm going to call my friend down the road and they're going to be like, yeah, I've always wanted to buy that business. The number you've put forward is exactly what I'm willing to spend. Voila, everyone is happy, right? It doesn't really work that way. And
mm,
so if you consider that what you're trying to do is be in the right opportunity for the right buyer at the right time, that third thing is the thing you could have the most control over if you were profitable or an efficient business. Because I can operate a business that's making more money than it's spending for as long as it does that. And then when the right buyer comes along, we get a good transaction on the outcome.
right.
Now that's true whether you're a bootstrap business or a venture capital backed business, right? But the thing with venture capital is that a lot of people never make the turn on an efficient business. Like if their cost to customer acquisition is, you know, takes you 3 years to pay back, right? So
Right.
a single customer has to be a customer for 3 years on a subscription before you ever start making money against the cost of acquiring them in the first place. That's a very dangerous business, right? It might look like you're growing quite quickly because you're deploying lots of capital, but in truth, it's fundamentally sick.
Mm. So let's zoom in a bit, Justin. When it comes to your efforts, your strategy, your deployment of these business development tactics and things like that, what are your priorities right now for StrikeGraph?
Yeah, it's going to sound a little pedantic, but I want to build a great company. Um,
Yeah.
and notice I didn't say I want to build the highest valuation or I want to hire the most number of people or raise the most amount of capital because I think those are vehicles to building a great business. They can be strategic decisions building a great business, but a great business fundamentally has a product that makes more money than it costs to spend and operate it. Um, and certainly, the better the product we believe in the market, the better the product solves the problem, the more valuable it is, the more money will people will pay for it, the more money it'll generate at the end of the day. So we're focused deeply on building the best possible product. What's a little insane to me, and I never got, and of course we mentioned I'm a CTO, is that it doesn't take that big a team to build an amazing product. It does take a smart team. They got to know how
Mm.
to work well together. They got to know how to develop great product. They got to have a vision for how they're going to spend 10 years innovating on their initial database architecture, for example. And so that is an area that I focus on deeply. But to me, the other side of the coin from a go-to-market perspective is build in efficiency to go to market as early as possible. If you raise capital, and we did, we've raised a couple of different rounds, and we've used it very efficiently. It gives us a lot of runway and flexibility to do what we want. But we thought about efficient sales from the very beginning. How much does it cost us to market? How much to win a deal? What should be the floor on our price per unit, right? Because if we spend too much money or we go too low on the price, then we're not building a sustainable business. Yeah.
So, if I was to read between the lines here, it sounds to me like there's two fronts that are really, really important to the work that you're doing. First of all, having a solid product, and having a solid product lends to uh, increased business as a result of people talking about how good the product is.
Right.
And so, the only way to get that referral engine um, running in a predictable way is to ensure that right from the get-go, there's something for people to talk about. So that's cool.
That's
Um,
crazy, isn't it? I mean, isn't it wild that we're like, man, a good product sells itself.
right. And it's contrary though to a lot of people's experiences. And now the writing's on the wall in terms of why that might be.
Yeah. Yeah.
Everybody believes that their product is a talk aboutable product,
Yeah.
but that may not always be the case.
Yeah.
So how are you being intentional or more thoughtful about engineering that so that the outcome is a higher referral rate?
Yeah. One thing is that, well, you got to be heavily focused on the customer experience. And a solution is not always the thing you click on, but it is the people you engage with. We do have kind of a saying, and I think it's generally true, that people do like to buy from people on some level.
Mm,
It could be that it's a free sign up and you're meeting with a customer success rep after that. But if there's just literally no one on the other side of a platform, um, I think that especially for a B2B type solution, there's a certain amount of struggle to retain customers and to expand with customers, et cetera. So that's a big part, I think, of creating an emotional attachment, to your provider, the provider of that product. The second thing, and this is a little bit of probably where I think the technical wizardry has to be in building software products,
hmm
is that you need someone that is really creative about data models and modeling real world scenarios in a good data architecture. And that's what I talk about where I say you need a platform that you can innovate on top of for 10 years. If you don't get the data model right from the beginning, then you have to go back and revamp that, year over year over year over year to keep driving innovation and new features. But if you get the data model right, you don't have to reinvent it later on. You build the database, you build the layers of integration onto the front end of the software, and then you build the front end of the software. But that's actually the icing on the cake. So you can re-engineer the icing many times over for brand new things and embed it on top of that data model, right? You want to build out, not reinvent.
Right.
And that was a deep focus for us early on. We spent a lot of time focusing on that, and we gave up on some short-term looking wizardry technologically to believe in a data model that over long term would allow us to build some technical wizardry that now when we bring it to market, we do get that referral. People are like, that's pretty magical. So yeah.
It's pretty good when people are telling their friends after just seeing a demo.
Right? That's
Once they
right.
see it's in play, they're like, wow, I got to tell everybody about this.
I've had a number of those, and it shocked me, Devin. Of course, I mean, you lose more deals than you win at the end of the day, um, but I've had things where we did a demo, and the company was like, "Yes, we really want to buy," and I also had, but I'm not signing the contract just yet. But I also have this friend down the road that's going through the same problem. We're going to introduce you, and we'll close the referral before we close the first deal, which
Wow.
is wild. Yeah.
So in the early stages here, because okay, yeah, engineering a product that's talk aboutable, like getting people to remark on your product, that's a huge bonus. And I read somewhere, and people listening to the show will know, I've mentioned this before, there is a statistics kind of floating around out there, related to B2B businesses, garnering new business 84% from referrals. So that doesn't leave a lot of room for the other part of this, which is the outbound and inbound marketing. Um, and that might be an indication that inbound, outbound in B2B is dead or broken or not working properly. But that doesn't change the challenge, and especially in the early days of, hey, I don't have any clients to refer. I don't have
Right.
anybody who's had a remarkable experience yet. I've had a couple of people who've tried this or tried that, and they maybe it wasn't a good fit, but we were still carving out what the product would look like, et cetera, right? So what percentage of your efforts are you dedicating to specifically that marketing function of acquiring new business?
Yeah, I would say we actually tend to look at SaaS optics some for how they recommend SaaS businesses kind of allocate expenditures as an initial guide rule. And maybe broadly, what I would recommend to listeners is either information interview your way into some knowledge about how, what percent of your spend is going to marketing outbound, what percent of your spend is going to marketing inbound, even in an adjacent business or something like that, just to give yourself some ideas of how much they pour into it. And I think we're pretty aligned with SaaS Optics. So we do spend on outbound and inbound marketing. It does facilitate, you know, the referral business, right? Because a simple like talk to this account exec that I'm talking to might garner you a meeting, but without having a good website and good content, without having a true marketing campaign to retarget or email to put them in a kind of a nurturing cycle, I think you'll miss out on a lot of opportunities. So I think these things power each other. The trick
Mm,
is on outbound and inbound, when people say it's just broken, are they are they using it for what it's useful for? Because I've felt that way too about our marketing at times. And it was because we were only doing email to maybe the wrong list or the content wasn't very good. There were
yeah.
just mechanics. And then on top of it, it wasn't about just, you're only going to get like 1% to 2%, I think, clicks on an email if you're doing well. And so the numbers are not in your favor to make it, work exceptionally well without a introduction of some sort, right? Yeah.
Something to soften the blow. This is an interesting kind of workflow that I've been working on myself, and maybe I'm divulging too much here, but from the top down, it looks something like, hey, here's a very short and sweet email to a very key person in a high enough level role in a business that can make a decision on this. And it's something that's flattering. Hey, love the work that you're up to. Saw that you did this, this, and this. We do this, this, and this, and we'd love to see if there's room for a collaboration or some way for us to work together, or whatever. Would you be opposed to having a conversation? So that buffer email kind of acts as that first, like, hey, we're here.
Yeah.
And then from there, it's like, okay, do we add in a follow-up phone call? So do we have an SDR rep or somebody reach out to that person and be like, hey, sent you an email. Just want to make sure that you got it and didn't land in the spam or whatever. And so now you got your second touch point. And then, oh, hey, yeah, I did see that, but can you send me more information? Now you send them that one webinar that you did, last year on that specific topic that you know can help them. And then, okay, then they see you pop up because they've touched your website. They see you pop up organically on Facebook or Instagram or wherever, right? And now you've had multiple touch points, you have multiple opportunities, and proven that you are a business worth having a conversation with.
Yeah.
And so, like, it's just all of these like small steps that um, traditionally, before data-driven marketing, analytics and all that, we would have to go to the place of business, have a handshake, give them a business card and a brochure, and then we would
Yeah.
have to send them a fax, and then later there was something in their mail, and so we forget that there is a tremendous amount of work that goes into that front end of building those relationships. I wonder, Justin, how much of your efforts are you tracking to kind of see where it's fruitful, where you can optimize, and then some of that more intangible stuff. Like, how do you manage those relationships in a way that's meaningful, but also keeping in mind that there's a business to be run here?
Yeah. Um, Certainly, somebody said to me once that all marketing is account-based marketing. And I think I've taken that to heart a little bit, that I
Hmm.
would rather have a list of 1,000 targets that's performing at a high rate than a list of 100,000 targets that's performing at a low rate. I think the more look, and especially if you do venture capital, they want the biggest possible total addressable market. They call it TAM, right? So they're like, oh, how can you get the biggest TAM? And you as a founder really need to be like, I get that there's a big TAM, but we're starting out. We need to focus on as small a sliver of the pie as we can to reach, let's say, 5 million in annual revenues as quickly as possible. And so I think getting your content in emails or SDRs or that type of communication more account focused by picking a smaller sliver, it will be more focused. The other thing that stands out to me is the attribution problem in marketing.
Hmm.
We've struggled against this, and I think in the early days of the internet, it was a lot easier. You're like, oh, this page is performing at this level, we get this many click-throughs, or this email, gets this many clicks, and things were easier because those things worked on their own in a way. They did. They were a little more standalone. For us, we've developed an attribution model to measure what's working and what's not, where we start the clock from a 90 days back close one. So, what was the earliest touch point 90 days back from close one, close lost? Then we give a point to every particular system that might have touched them along that way. So let's say that it was a referral plus an email plus an SDR outreach. That's 3 points, total across that went to those particular categories of outreach. That way, when we look back, if we're just seeing a median on everything, like everything's, getting a 30% of the points, then it is everything is needed, to drive. But if something is really overperforming, like for some reason, closed ones are much higher in points around SDR outreach, then it tells us something potentially about SDR outreach that we might want to investigate and look into. And I think there's a really another good saying, so many mantras in this work that you double down on what's working, you know,
Hmm.
and that's actually, especially in a little bit leaner times like right now in the tech industry, that doubling down on what's working is probably the most confidence inducing strategy. Yeah.
Yep. You reminded me of one of my early experiences as a marketing guy, coming in on I'm riding the wave of that early metrics. Like, I can
Go
prove
for it.
that we had, 1,000 clicks onto this specific website or web page, and that from there we had 30 people opt in and
Right.
2 people signed a deal. And I got accused by on staff junior marketing expert of
Right.
presenting the leadership with vanity metrics. And that has haunted me ever since, Justin. This idea that there are some metrics out here that are just they're false or they're not giving you the right information, and they're not necessary to measure. And I've always had this thought, well, yeah, but if I have a video that I've created where I'm talking about a solution and 10,000 people watch that video, and then I retarget the people that watched 50% of that video or more because they were obviously more interested in that thing,
Yeah.
how is video views a vanity metric then when it was a marketing qualifier
That's a,
for further touch points with a very specific subsect of the audience of people that we've reached,
yeah.
right? Such
Well,
a difficult thing.
having been around for the days where we used to say who had the better website, like that was the thing,
Yeah.
when there was room to innovate around it.
Yeah,
It sounds like somebody was a little jealous of your tool, but it's
perhaps.
hard data. You're not, especially something like this podcast, for example, if you were to publish it on YouTube and you were to say, hey, we directly got this many organic views on it, and it did lead to this many people filling out a form and doing a demo, and it
Mhm.
did lead to this many demos turning into closed won deals. That's pretty unassailable. Something's happening there. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think what's more important is rather than clinging to buzzwords for justifications, more it's about really structuring a clear path for people to follow and
Good.
measuring the steps that are involved in that, and from that vantage point, you gain the insight to understand that customer journey, I think, a little bit better.
Yeah.
So, Justin, we're kind of coming to a close of our time together here, and I'm curious if we could perhaps just shift focus a little bit to what's on the horizon for your efforts with your company right now. What are you aiming at? What are you hoping to achieve? And how are you planning on getting there?
Yeah, we're certainly growth focused, within reason though. So we're trying to maximize the impact of the team we've got on staff and the skill set that's available, and both product and the rest of the larger marketing infrastructure, sales infrastructure, just get it to maximum efficiency. How much new revenue can we bring in a particular quarter? Alongside that, the we work a lot with churn and expansion, and so that can be a really we've met a lot of companies that have a leaky bucket problem, right? They might be bringing in a lot of new business, but they're leaking about the same. And we've had quarters where churn wasn't great, and quarters where we solved some churn problems. And you just, I think that as you grow the business, we pay close attention to both. Um, I probably get most excited about what we're doing from a product perspective.
Hmm.
We see two major areas of heavy innovation in security and compliance. One is to continue to automate the literal testing of security compliance. And StrikeGraph has been spending years on data collection and AI development to reduce the amount of humans in the testing loop. I think that this really matters to me philosophically, that when we can have more machine-driven testing, we get more accurate results because data in equals data out as opposed to opinion-driven testing by a human. And of course, we get the efficiency too, because the results are practically immediate, at least from our ability to measure human time.
Hmm.
So that's an area of significant investment, and we're super excited. Our Verify AI feature set has already been very powerful, and we continue to invest in it heavily. The second is that we see a lot of complexity. I like working on complex problems. Um, and there is a ton of complexity in designing a good security posture. I say it simply, but man,
Yeah.
it's like the finance function at a company, right? It touches everything, every single aspect of the operations of a business. And so we've been developing these concepts of federated models of shared security between divisions in a business, such as geolocations or specific product areas in larger businesses. And that's really resonated because I think one of the ways to combat complexity is to narrow the focus or scope of the problem area you're trying to solve. And so if we can help both understand, the forest a little bit, we've got, all this different area and they have different security concerns, but as well get into a specific part of a tree and say, how well is this doing on its security work? That's where federated security has been really powerful. So those are some of the areas we're kind of leaned into from a product perspective.
Yeah, that's really exciting. Especially the integration of new AI technologies and things like that. I know that it's been said many times, but this is the worst the technology is ever going to be, and it's doing incredibly powerful things. Could we get a peek behind the curtain and what you're experimenting with the AI implementations?
Yeah, I'm happy to. And I'm not as bought into the ChatGPT hype as a lot. As a matter of fact, I was just talking with my chief product officer today, and we're like, yeah, I'm pretty frustrated sometimes. I keep having to rewrite what I asked for it to write a lot of times, especially to stand out. One of the core challenges in an audit or assessment of a security posture is that every company is unique. So the way they are going to operate securely is going to be slightly different from company to company. We realize that. We bank that into our platform, that data model from the get-go, which means that we can innovate on top of it. So the thing that makes our system quite powerful is that, let's say that you have a privacy policy and you're also delivering your product in Australia. And Australia has some privacy rules that needs to be written into your privacy policy. That's unique to you. It's not going to be the same for every company. And in StrikeGraph, the way our AI works is you describe your expectations, like a testing rubric, for that particular proof that your privacy policy is correct. Our AI translates what you wrote as a set of requirements into a literal testing rubric dynamically, then runs the test. So we read the document and we say, did it meet the rubric? Which is essentially what an auditor does at the end of the day, is you give them a spec, you say, this is what you're expecting. And they say, did I receive, what was expected, yes or no? And that's, that type of essentially taking a large language model or generative AI, utilizing it in a multi-stage process to break apart information, to create new information, to assess new information that's coming in. That I think is where we're going to see broadly the types of AI innovation go. Yeah.
Wow, that's really cool. I'm reminded of some of my early experimentation in trying to get ChatGPT to help me write a blog. And I get that it's not totally the same thing here, but it was like, hey, write me a blog, and then you just get this gunk and none of
Yeah.
it makes sense. And okay, stop here. Can you create like a nice outline for what a good blog would include?
Yeah.
And oh, okay, now we got a framework. And then from the framework, I'm like, okay, now write this section. Oh, okay, that's not the output I wanted. And now so it's taken me 2 years of tinkering with this thing to get it close to writing like me. Still, I would say it does probably 75% of the lifting, and I'll kind of come in on the other 25. But to hear that you guys have advanced it to a total different degree in how it's being held accountable, it sounds like, to its own actions. Like you're giving it the framework, and then it has to play inside of that ball court to get the output that you're looking for. Is my understanding accurate there, or am I off?
That's right. Yeah.
That's really cool.
We use it to help us define the prompts that are required for it to use to do appropriate testing. Yeah.
It's like getting it to tell you how to tell it what you need.
Well,
That's
it knows itself quite well. And that's one thing that it does, I think, better than anything. Like if to your point, if I ask it to write a blog post, it might not know very well what it should say. But when I
right.
ask it to do things for itself, it actually tends to be fairly precise. I think also one thing that all entrepreneurs, when they're thinking about tech, should think about is definitely go and research open source AI, large language models, generative AI. There is so much community driven tools
Mm.
that don't require an expenditure to a third party to develop very innovative solutions. Yeah.
Yeah, to that point, there is a lot of little communities, these little kind of factions of people who are really, really getting dialed in on the engineering side of it. So there's a ton of resources out there for people.
Good.
Listen, Justin, this has been an incredible conversation. You've been very generous with your time and your wisdom, and I'm very grateful for that. To close off the conversation, I wonder if we can leave on a high note here and thinking about other people who are kind of out there, up to it, trying to create something for themselves. If they were facing some challenges and didn't know where to go, what sort of advice would you offer them to kind of help push them along and keep them pursuing their journey?
Certainly, I think that building a community around you of other entrepreneurs, don't necessarily worry about if they're in the same business or not. I mean, my early days when I was bootstrapping companies, I got hooked up through the Technology Association of Georgia with four other entrepreneurs, and we would meet once a month. And one might have a lawn care business, and mine might be tech. That's okay. It just gives you a kind of a community, a little bit of group therapy, to discuss what's happening.
Yeah.
That's really helpful. And then certainly if you're in a venture capital back space, our investors hold amazing like CEO summits that I definitely attend and talk with my other colleagues about what's working for them or not. So I say drop the chip on your shoulder. There's the nothing, you can really trip yourself up by not being really open-hearted about what you don't know.
Hmm. uh Ryan Holiday just released a book recently, Ego is the Enemy, and I think that that's something that you're pointing at is just get out of your own way
Yep.
and build that community around you. Very solid advice. If somebody wanted to reach out to you to pick your brain further or perhaps work with you, what's the best way for them to do that?
Oh yeah, LinkedIn is great. Of course, it's the only social media I can keep up with anymore.
Fair enough.
I do have a Mastodon account if you can track me down, but it's mostly music. Um, then please, for folks that are, security compliance has impacted a lot of businesses and it's constantly growing.
Hmm.
Um, you can visit us at strikegraph.com. And certainly, we're happy to provide a demonstration of the software and talk about our solution in solving these compliance issues. Yeah.
Wonderful. We'll make sure to link to all that in the show notes so anybody listening or watching will find you easily. On that note, if you wanted to reach out to me and my team for any of your marketing or AI needs, you can visit nextgengrowth.com. Otherwise, that's it for this episode. Thanks for joining us for this conversation, and I will see you in the next.